Howdy do, ladies and turds. Happy Halloween to all of you out there. If you watched my video from last week, my experience with the Metroid Dread launch day, and the crazy story that I shared, then you would have seen all the way at the end that I actually carved a Metroid Dread themed pumpkin for this Halloween. And so in this video, I'll be showing you exactly how I did that, right? I'm not a professional, I don't know what I'm doing, right? The tools I use, I would not recommend using as I'm doing this. If you follow this video and you lose a finger or something, don't blame me. This isn't a tutorial, this is just showing how I, created this design and this pumpkin. I'm just a fan of Metroid, I'm a fan of Halloween, and I wanted to share this, right? With that said, let's get right into this pumpkin here. Step 1. Designing the pumpkin itself. The main materials I used for this step were basically a projector, a computer, a pen, and a tripod, right? So I had the projector connected to a tripod, I had that connected to my computer, and I had the wallpaper for Metroid Dread on full screen. Turn off all the lights, it's easier to see. And from that point, I try to keep the pumpkin on a smooth surface because it's very curvy and it was very difficult to actually draw on. But because of how heavy it was, it actually kept going off balance, right? Like the weight kept moving around. And so I kept it down with one hand, and the other hand I began tracing my design. 100% you can't move this thing, otherwise the image that's being shown on the projector and what you get on the pumpkin will look completely distorted. So take your time because, using a pen on a pumpkin is very difficult as is. And don't be afraid to get a little bit creative either, right? Samus and the logo, I really liked how they turned out, but the Emmys on the other hand, they were a bit too small and they were all kind of like hovering around Samus. I wanted them to be more spread out and, kind of take up more of the pumpkin. And so for the Emmys, I actually resized, repositioned, and I kind of like zoomed in and out, and I just kind of experimented with what I think, looked the best for me. I had some music in the background, and for the next 5 hours, I just kind of slowly took my time drawing on the pumpkin itself, and I'm really glad how it turned out, right? And so the more careful you are with this design and you basically take your time, the easier it will be in the next few steps when you're actually carving it out on the pumpkin itself. And so using Sharpie, I actually marked Samus's visor, her armor, as well as all the eyes on the Emmys here. I knew that, each one of these are going to be carved in a little bit deeper than the rest of the outline. Now that I was happy with the design, we go to step 2. Where do I even start from here? I have some experience with pumpkin carving. I basically used an X-Acto knife and I created a Night of the Living Dead themed pumpkin for Halloween sometime like back in like 2015 or something. I used it on stream as we watched the movie together before actually smashing it into pieces with a vehicle. And so I wouldn't be surprised if you can get these kind of results using an X-Acto knife, but it didn't feel like it was the ideal tool to what I wanted to achieve with this pumpkin. So I looked it up, and some people actually recommended using a Dremel tool instead. I was like, I have one of those somewhere in the garage, let me go get it, right? And the moment I brought this thing out, basically, I had immediate PTSD, right? Basically, I've only used this tool once before, creating my Crash Bandicoot Aku Aku and Uka Uka masks. And even though the masks turned out really cool, there were many times during that video where the Dremel itself kind of slipped a bit too far, or it kind of moved a bit too fast. And if I wasn't holding it with two hands, I could have easily lost a finger or done a lot of damage to my body, right? It was extremely dangerous. If you want to see, a more detailed process, go take a yonder at the video here. I guess maybe I can figure it out. Let's just do it and, see how this goes. Do not do basically what I did in this video. And so this tool is basically designed to be used with two hands like this, right? I needed it to be as precise as possible. And so I actually held it like this, all the way as close to the tip as possible, kind of like a pen. This thing is heavy, it's putting all the weight on your wrist, the thing is plugged in as well, and so, you can't really go that far without it pulling back. It's also vibrating at full speed, the end here, right? So anything could go wrong. And so as you see on here, there's actually a variety of different bits you can attach to this Dremel, depending on what your project is about. For me, I used 3 different kinds, right? The first one was this triangle point here, which I used for different details and refining the small lines. The second one I used was the mini ballpoint tip, which was mainly for the logo, as well as smaller outlines. And then the third one was a larger ballpoint tip for the outline and deeper cuts. With that done, I put on my safety gear, brought the camera, and I went outside to begin working. Step 3. carving the design into the pumpkin. I found a strong, large, flat table, and I basically did my entire work on there. But sometimes when that wasn't enough and I needed the pumpkin to be at a certain angle, I actually just used my water bottle, put it underneath the pumpkin. I was able to like kind of put it down like this and made it much easier for me to work with. I then attached the triangle point bit onto the Dremel and slowly began tracing my design. It's very important for you to take your time here. It doesn't have to be perfect, but as long as it's close enough, then that will do. Aside for the drawing itself, this process probably took the longest, just slowly carving my way with the Dremel, taking a break, and continuing where I left off. Step 4. Carving in the highlights. Now that the outline itself is finished, it's time to kind of like create all the little details where the light itself will shine through and really make this pumpkin look fully 3D. So for this part, I actually switched over to the mini ballpoint Dremel bit and began working on the Emmy eyes. And similar to the previous triangle Dremel bit, the mini ballpoint one carved right into the pumpkin, and so finishing the Emmys was really fast and it only took a few minutes to do. And so after, finishing 6 of these Emmy eyes here, I started feeling a little bit more comfortable with the Dremel, and so I started moving to Samus herself, right? Since Samus is the main centerpiece here of the entire pumpkin and has many small parts, I wanted to make sure that I was very careful when working on this design. When I got to the visor though, I was going around a few times and I was having some trouble at this bottom piece here. So the bottom of the visor actually has kind of like this small hole. It's not that big of a deal. It looks fine, right? Like it blends in, just as well. But I was just a little bit worried that it might have ruined the entire design. Step 5. Carving the outline. Back in my Miiverse doodling days, I really liked the look of my drawings having an outline around them as it made the artwork pop out from the black backgrounds. And so with this pumpkin, I wanted Samus to have a similar look, right? And planned to create this here outline as well. So I switched over to the large ballpoint Dremel bit and began carving around Samus. Unlike the other 2 Dremel bits, this one felt a little bit different. It had some kind of resistance to it, right? I had to go over the surface multiple times just to make one cut. It was very tedious. It hurt my wrist a lot, and similar to the visor here, as I was going through the outline around Samus, I accidentally went a little bit too deep on the left here, but at this point it was already getting a little bit dark, so I was like, alright, it's fine, it's okay, I'll deal with it another day. And so at this point I kind of just cleaned off as much ink from the pumpkin as I could, and I brought it inside, right? And I just kind of looked at it. I was like, you know what? I might actually be able to do this. I kind of admired the progress, and I was like feeling confident. I was like, look at this, like this is crazy, like I made this, right? Isn't that awesome? Like it's not finished yet, but it looks really cool. I then quickly recorded my ending to the Metroid Dread launch day story video. I edited that together and I uploaded it onto YouTube. So I hope everybody enjoyed watching it because it was just, a crazy experience from start to finish. And then it rained for a few days, so I took a little bit of a break and showed off the pumpkin on the stream. I was like, look how cool that is, right? Like I'm really proud of this. And as I was doing that, I accidentally snapped the top piece off. I was like, oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. That was a complete accident. At this point, the pumpkin was sitting inside my room where it's, nice and warm for a few days now. And so the visor part itself, as well as this part on the corner, they were starting to get green and moldy, right? And the more I cleaned out these sections, the deeper these holes would go, creating more mold. And then, it was just a cycle that just wouldn't end. Step 6. Carving out the logo. I used all 3 Dremel bits on this part here and took my time getting the letters just right, because one slip could have, removed the letter and turned this into Metroid Dead or something like that, right? The original plan was actually to have this top portion of the logo, the Metroid, to stand out in 3D, whereas the bottom part, I wanted it to be completely cut out, so that way the light would just shine right through and kind of resemble the original wallpaper, right? And basically if I did that, Dread would have just been like basically some holes and they wouldn't have resembled letters at all. The finished logo looked awesome, but then this little section here above the M, it was really bothering me. It was just kind of there, just kind of sticking onto the edge. Should I cut this off? It looks kind of weird. And so I kind of did. I carved it out, I removed it, and immediately after that, I kind of regretted my decision. Now it just looked like a giant empty hole. I was like, okay, I don't have time to deal with this right now. I'll figure it out later. And step 7, gutting the pumpkin. With the final design all finished, basically, I want to have a light underneath the pumpkin so it kind of shines through, right? And at night, how cool would that be when, children on Halloween and they see just Metroid Dread at night? Like, how awesome is that, right? Like, so I grabbed my rusty trusty knife here and I started cutting. And just a fun fact here, this knife is the same one I used in my cheesy action video from a million years ago, where it was actually thrown at me and lodged right into my neck. It's kind of crazy that, I still have this after over like 10 years now. And so a lot of people, they actually cut their pumpkin from the top here, but I heard that it's a little bit easier when you do it from the bottom instead. And so I began cutting out a hexagon shape on the bottom here, and then realized just how easy it actually was to go through the pumpkin, right? Like, these things are kind of fragile, but it also surprised me just how thick the actual pumpkin was. And I will say though, like, the moment I took that out, this thing started to smell like raw booty cheeks, right? But it did look really cool, kind of like a forest covered in vines and stuff, right? And part of me half expected a chest burster to jump right out of here, but all we basically got were just pumpkin innards. I would recommend not using some kind of cheap plastic spoon, because the one I had broke right away on the first scoop. Like, look at this thing, it snapped right in half. So just get yourself the real deal, use a metal one, and it makes your life a million times easier. Grab yourself some kind of bucket and begin emptying out the insides, scraping out the edges, trying to get all the wet stuff gone. Scrape it all out, make sure you get everything, put it in the bucket, and the remains you can feed to the squirrels, right? They need to get a little bit chunky on Halloween too. Adding the final touches. The empty section above the logo was starting to bother me, and so I actually cut out a piece from the bottom here, kind of, reshaped it to fit into place. It looked kind of spiffy, right? But everything was still wet, and so the glue didn't really stick on. So instead, I found these random nails on the ground and put them into the pumpkin, and that kind of held in place for a little bit before falling out. In the end, I just let the entire pumpkin dry out overnight, and I glued this piece over instead. And not only did it hold, but it also looked a million times better too. I checked underneath the light, and the Emmys themselves, they looked a little bit darker than I would have liked, so I actually went back with my Dremel and retraced the outlines of them, making it a little bit thicker, and I think overall, it turned out much better. And I really wasn't liking the look of the visor, right? Like, it kept getting moldy, and I was like, okay, something needs to be done with this, right? And so I actually took the glue and I put it inside right there to give it kind of like a metallic glass look. And once it was all dried up, I feel like it really works, right? And it looks really, really cool. Like, it really stands out, and not only does it hide the mold, but it gives Samus's visor like a unique look compared to everything else on this pumpkin. And with that said, we're basically finished right here, right? Like, look how awesome that is, right? Like, the carving turned out awesome, the design and the details are still there, you can clearly see the logo, the visor itself glued out, and it's, it looks shiny, the Emmys are right there, they're top notch. It turned out awesome, it was top notch, and, I wouldn't have it any other way. But even though it looks awesome in daytime, let me show you just how cool it looks with the lights turned off. It's like a completely different beast. Like, just look at that, right? Like, it kind of resembles a Metroid too, where like the insides are transparent. Look how cool that is. The Emmys, you can clearly see them. Samus right there with all her designs. Metroid Dread logo. That is awesome. I did not expect it to turn out this, good, but I guess it goes to show you that if you believe, you can do anything, of course. What I found interesting though, the parts that were moldy, right? Samus's visor and the green part here next to her arm cannon, those parts are a little bit darker. And so I wonder if that's a result of the mold itself, or if that's maybe something else. And so for the next few weeks, I'm actually going to leave this pumpkin outside, right? It's going to be winter, it's going to rain, maybe animals might get to it, who knows? And so if you want to see this pumpkin turn from, this beautiful design into a small green mushy, basically nothing, come follow me on Twitter at the Slovak Mountain Man, and you can see the updates of, how that turns out there. And there you go, ladies and turds. That's the final pumpkin right there. I hope you enjoyed the video. I really liked how the design looked, right? Even then, this pumpkin isn't perfect, and there are definitely some things I would do differently if I could do it again. First would be I would carve this entire pumpkin out all in one sitting, right? That way, the entire design could basically dry out, evenly, and some parts wouldn't look older than others. Second would be I would take my time when doing this entire design and try not to mess up or create any deeper holes, because as you can see, you know, the mold, it really like stands out and it looks ugly when compared to the whole dried pumpkin itself, right? Third would be probably to use a different tool than a Dremel here, right? One-handed was extremely dangerous. This thing is moving full speed, it's very heavy, and so all the weight is basically being distributed onto my wrist. I still feel, you know, some kind of pain in my wrist. I'm continuously stretching it out and stuff. I still feel a little bit cramped. And so something like a laser cutter wouldn't, you know, made this process so much less painful. Fourth would be actually putting a light underneath the pumpkin. So as I'm carving it, I can see just how different, you know, the Dremel reacts with the different depths and how cool the 3D light would look. Fifth, I think my original plan was actually to, you know, remove this entire sky area. That would have completely been, you know, carved out. The Emmys themselves would have looked like shadows, and then the bottom over here would have actually remained like this, a pumpkin. It would have resembled the wallpaper much closer than how this does right now. But I didn't have enough time to do that, and it would have been a lot more work, right? And 6 would be if I took an idea and I just kind of sat on it for a little bit. This little piece on the M could have been avoided if I just kind of looked at it and, you know, maybe a day or two I just kind of left it like that and just kind of thought about, you know, that way I could have prevented, you know, some extra work before it was already too late. And so with that said, finally we are finished here with the pumpkin. Ladies and turds, happy Halloween everyone over there. I hope you have candy. I hope you get nice and fat out there, right? I hope you don't lose your teeth. Enjoy the costumes, enjoy, you know, all the sweets, all the horror games, all the horror movies. And not just that, but I was actually looking at the back of these, right? Because I'm going to be giving these out to toddlers on Halloween. And I was looking, oh my lord, like a few pieces of candy is 150, 130, 200 calories each. And I'm over here trying to lose some pounders, right? And so, you know, back in the toddler days, I would just eat these like nonstop. My teeth would get ruined. You know, I'm an old hag. It's not as it used to be. Like, I want to eat candy too, but I don't want to get fat. I've made some progress throughout the months. So, ladies and turds, I hope everyone has a happy Halloween. I hope you enjoyed my pumpkin video. Go watch some movies. Thank you, Patreons, too, for the lovely support throughout the years, right? You've helped me more than you could ever, you know, like realize. And so if anyone else would like to support this channel, make my videos go crazier and be bigger, I would appreciate if you join my page there. Any amount helps. I appreciate it a lot. And so fun fact here, this is actually the second time I'm recording this pumpkin video, right? The first time I did it, I was going for about like an hour and a half just talking, and maybe 10 minutes in, OBS basically randomly shut off. I didn't notice this, and so about 50 minutes of that video, it was all in-camera audio. Kind of bootleg, but I'm gonna make that a Patreon exclusive video. Go join my Patreon, I'll share it on there. This is definitely my favorite time of the year. Spooky month, right? Everyone goes in costumes, watches horror movies. I wish every day could be Halloween, right? And then it goes right into winter. Like, it doesn't get better than that. I'm getting sweaty though. My glasses are slowly falling off. I'm gonna finish the video here. There is one more thing, you know, left to do with this pumpkin. Is that a reference to someone?
Yeah, YouTube's.
Oh, my tubes.
Looks
gorgeous.
just like, yeah.
Gorgeous, look at him. So now that Shippity and I had our pumpkins ready, it was the day before Halloween, and we decided to put up some last minute decorations. We took these 3 tires here, stacked them up together from the edges, and then also took Shippity's old chair here with the bowl inside, and basically that's where, you know, everyone who's going for trick-or-treating can take out the candy, right? But it doesn't stop there. Right next to that, basically we decided we're gonna have like a little table ready and basically just watch movies or play any games in costume while people, you know, walk by and get their candy. And so I had an idea to actually paint a customized Shrek Beware Ogre sign right here. I brought the same paint that I used for my walls, but the camera ran out of battery, so I wasn't able to get the full time lapse here, but I kept, you know, painting and basically finishing this entire thing for another like hour into the darkness. I went to sleep, woke up, I don't know if it rained or something or if there was like fog or whatever, but my beautiful, you know, Shrek drawing here, it was completely like gone. I was hearing toddlers walking around outside, and so I actually started, you know, painting again. It's not as good as it was the, you know, first time around. I finished painting that. I think it turned out, you know, beautiful. 2 or 3 hours later, Shippity finally came out. He had a beautiful Mario outfit. I went into my Sonic outfit. Not only did we have some snacks, we also watched a few horror movies. I brought over the Switch. We played some games. I made some progress in Metroid. And overall, it was a pretty awesome, Halloween. Not a single person mentioned anything about the pumpkin or Metroid or anything, right? And not only that, but I don't think anyone noticed that this, derpy sign here was actually a reference to the Oscar award-winning animated film Shrek. We had one person actually ask us though, like, where's the ogre? What does this sign mean? And I just told them that, you gotta be on the lookout. He's out there running around somewhere, so be careful because he might eat your fingers. And it was kind of funny because there was actually 3 different toddlers. They were also dressed up as Sonic, just like me. There was also someone else who was like a hot dog. Someone wore like a chicken outfit or something. And even though we basically told all these people like, hey, grab a handful, right? Take as much candy as you want. We didn't have to refill the bowl even once, right? There was still half of the candy left, as well as this entire giant bucket underneath the table. As the hours slowly went by, it started getting a little bit darker. It was also really cold outside, so we had to put on some coats. Basically, we stayed outside just playing games and watching movies until 7:30 p.m. before deciding that, it might be time just to come inside instead. And so we brought everything in and actually walked around just to see what, the decorations still look like before everything was taken down. One house had like this sacrifice going on, which looked kind of cool with the little fire underneath. Another house had this spider with like a hypnotizing like backside. I don't know if it was like a projector or something, but it looked really cool. And then the last house had like this giant inflatable cat thing, right? When we were strolling at the beginning of October, we saw this thing put up once and then it completely disappeared. And so it's, kind of lucky that we were able to catch this before it was taken down again. Overall, I think, this Halloween was pretty swell. We had some laughs, we were waving at people, gave them candy, even though, they didn't recognize the references and stuff. And, it took a bit of work to make this pumpkin, as well as, this derpy looking display. It's a memory that I'll remember for the rest of my life. So thank you for watching, ladies and turds, and I will see you on another lovely video. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye. Whoosh-ah.